Look, we all think we know this man. We live in this modern era that's just defined by extreme stress, constant burnout, and this endless, exhausting pursuit of success. And when we look for modern role models to make sense of it all, we usually look straight to the titans of our age. But human psychology, it is rarely as simple as some glossy magazine cover makes it seem. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to unravel a massive psychological mystery. We are looking at a man who fundamentally altered the entire trajectory of human history. Not once, but twice. And as we peel back the layers of this story, I really want you to ask yourself, how well do you actually know the architects of our modern world?
If you ask anyone on the street right now who Bill Gates is, the image is incredibly consistent, right? He's the sweater-wearing, book-recommending, gentle grandfather of modern technology. He's the guy funding global vaccine distribution, fighting polio, tackling climate change head-on. He's literally the ultimate picture of benevolent, calming philanthropy, a man who seemingly wants nothing more than to just heal a broken planet. But what if I told you that this comforting image is actually the result of a massive, unprecedented psychological pivot?
Because what if the world's greatest savior was once its absolute most ruthless villain? I really want you to hold that dissonance in your mind for a second. How does a human being go from being viewed as this terrifying global predator, a man who would literally stop at nothing to completely crush his enemies, to becoming the ultimate planetary healer? It's a staggering contradiction in identity.
Act 1. The Two Faces of Gates.
Okay, let's dive into this. To truly understand the psychology of extreme, world-bending success, we have to confront a really uncomfortable reality. The exact traits required to conquer the world might actually be the exact same traits required to save it. Just take a second to absorb the sheer scale of this contrast. On one side, you have the 2020s philanthropist, pouring billions into healthcare. But on the other, the 1990s monopolist, a man famously dragged into court by the Department of Justice, accused of using brutal, cutthroat tactics to just annihilate his rivals. The guy who fights global pandemics today was once literally considered a plague on the free market. To understand how we even got here, we have to go back to the very beginning.
Act 2. The Ruthless Rise. We need to rewind the clock to 1975. Completely forget the cozy sweaters. We are entering an era of unchecked, razor-sharp ambition. The internal motto wasn't, hey, let's innovate together. It was me and down with my enemies. This isn't just the history of a tech company. It is a map of a relentless, obsessive psychological drive. From the 1975 Altair bluff to the monumental IBM deal in '81, the rise of the clones, all the way to the explosive DOJ lawsuit in '98, every single step on this path is marked by a deep-seated win-at-all-costs mentality. It was this desperate need to not just participate in the market, but to completely, totally own it.
Just look at how this whole empire started. It's the ultimate art of the bluff. In 1975, a young Gates and his childhood friend Paul Allen see this new Altair 8800 microcomputer on the cover of a magazine. Gates immediately picks up the phone, calls the creator, and claims, with absolute, unwavering confidence, that he's developed software for it. Well, here is the mind-bending part. He had nothing. Zero. Not a single line of code. It was a complete and total fabrication. But the second the creator showed interest, Gates and his team scrambled. They worked frantically for 8 weeks straight to build the software they had literally just lied about having. It's the ultimate fake-it-till-you-make-it, driven by this intense, paranoid fear that if he didn't claim the territory right that second, someone else would.
And that sheer opportunistic brilliance? It only escalated from there. A few years later, IBM, which was the biggest player in the world at the time, needed an operating system for their new personal computers. Now, Gates didn't build one from scratch. No, he went out and bought a system called QDOS from another developer for a mere $50,000. He then turned right around and offered it to IBM. But here's the psychological masterstroke, the single move that changed tech history forever. He didn't sell it to them outright. He licensed it.
He deliberately kept the rights to license that exact same software to all of IBM's competitors. Think about that. Because of that single, calculating, ice-cold negotiation, by 1987, IBM found themselves bleeding out. They lost a staggering $2.8 billion as the market just flooded with cheaper clones, all running Microsoft software. Gates had completely outmaneuvered the giants of the industry. But this level of intense, predatory focus, it absolutely comes with a deeply human cost.
Act 3. Betraying a friend. You see, when you are driven by a need for absolute perfection and total control, that pressure doesn't just crush your competitors out in the market, it crushes the people closest to you. Inside the empire, the work culture was notoriously toxic, ruled by an iron fist. Imagine the modern anxiety of a harsh workplace and multiplied by 100. Gates was known to roam the halls, famously screaming at his own engineers, publicly dismantling their confidence. He would literally memorize his employees' license plates just so he could track who was arriving early and who was leaving late in the parking lot. He would routinely dismiss proposals by yelling that they were the stupidest idea he had ever heard. It was an environment of terror, driven by a leader who just could not tolerate anything less than total, absolute devotion to his vision.
But the true emotional low point of this era, the moment that really reveals the terrifying depth of this ambition, involves his childhood friend and co-founder Paul Allen. Allen had been diagnosed with cancer, and while he was physically suffering, fighting for his life, and unable to work at full capacity, Gates wasn't exactly offering sympathy. Instead, according to the accounts in our sources, Gates was actively plotting to dilute Allen's shares in the company. He felt Allen just wasn't contributing enough anymore. Even staring at the very real mortality of his closest friend, the sheer instinct for total corporate control superseded human empathy.
Act 4. The Empire at War.
That same cold, calculating aggression soon spilled out onto a global scale. Microsoft wasn't just a company anymore, right? It was an empire, and the emperor was incredibly paranoid about losing his throne to anyone, anywhere. Enter the browser wars. A company called Netscape created a web browser that threatened Microsoft's absolute dominance. So Gates didn't just compete with them, he deployed asymmetrical warfare. He bundled Microsoft's own browser, Internet Explorer, into Windows completely for free. I mean, how do you compete with free? You can't. It was a deliberate, suffocating tactic designed to starve Netscape of its oxygen and utterly destroy them.
But this bloodthirsty approach finally caught the attention of the one entity on Earth bigger than Microsoft. In 1998, the United States Department of Justice stepped in. The empire had grown way too aggressive, way too dominant, and now it was facing an existential threat that could literally tear it apart piece by piece.
So, the crucial point here is how Gates reacted when he was finally cornered. During the antitrust trial, he gave this highly evasive, incredibly frustrating testimony. The entire public watched as the boy genius of tech morphed into an argumentative, defensive monopolist right before their eyes. The government seriously threatened to split Microsoft in two. Eventually, sure, there was a settlement in 2001, but the damage to his public psyche was done. Worldwide, he was painted as the ultimate corporate villain.
Act 5. The Great Transformation. But then, right at the peak of this public vilification, right when the heat is at its absolute highest, the narrative fractures. A sudden, dramatic pivot changes everything. In the year 2000, Gates steps down as CEO of Microsoft. He simply walks away from the daily control of the empire he built with such incredible ruthlessness, and he turns his intense analytical mind toward a completely different kind of global dominance, philanthropy.
And this number brilliantly illustrates the sheer, unimaginable scale of this transformation. He didn't just start a little charity, he established an endowment of $36 billion. We are talking about a private foundation with a budget larger than the economies of entire nations. The exact same man who once wanted to control every single computer desk in the world now wanted to eradicate disease from the globe. The ambition hadn't shrunk at all, it just completely changed targets.
And the results? They are undeniably staggering. 22 million. That is the estimated number of human lives saved through his massive vaccination campaigns, his fight against polio, and his deep interventions in the world's poorest countries. 22 million people who are alive today because the furious energy that once crushed Netscape and terrified software engineers was redirected into global healthcare. It is an immense, heavy number that completely shifts how we have to look at his legacy.
Act 6. The Final Verdict.
Which brings us to the ultimate psychological dilemma of this explainer. How on earth do we judge a life split into two such extreme halves? We face this profound duality, the ruthless tactics of corporate destruction on one side and miraculous, unprecedented humanitarian outcomes on the other. Can a person really be driven by the exact same obsessive, controlling psychological traits, yet yield completely opposite moral results? Is the man who saves the world simply the man who conquered it, just wearing a different sweater? I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought. When the history books are finally written, how does the math of human morality actually work? Does saving 22 million lives erase a history of ruthless corporate destruction? Or do the two simply exist side by side, a permanent, totally unresolved paradox of human nature? Think about that the next time you see a seemingly perfect hero on your screen. Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.